Welcome back to our series on the I Ching. In our first lesson, we explored how the I Ching influenced thinkers like Leibniz and Jung, the philosophy of the great ultimate, and how to cast a reading using the three-coin method. In this second lesson, we're diving deeper into the source code. We'll follow the process of our binary expansion into the four faces as they divide into the 8 building blocks of the oracle, the trigrams. You'll learn how these trigrams stack together to create the 64 hexagrams, which forms a complete map of human experience. When the four faces divide one last time, they create the 8 trigrams. These are the fundamental building blocks of the I Ching. By adding a third line to our stacks of yin and yang, we move from simple states of energy to the 8 core forces of nature. These are often called the children of yin and yang. Each represents a specific element: heaven and earth, thunder and mountain, fire and water, wind, also known as wood, and lake. These 8 symbols are the vocabulary of the oracle. Everything in the human experience can be described using a combination of these 8 elemental forces. Every hexagram is a conversation between 2 elemental forces. To understand this, we look at the inner and outer trigrams. The lower trigram, also known as the inner trigram, is the foundation. It represents the individual, us, your private thoughts, your motivations, your character. It's the internal seed of the situation or the inquiry. The upper trigram, or the outer trigram, represents the world around you. It's your environment, the public persona that you convey. It's the direction the scenario is headed. It's the unfolding action in the physical universe. When you read a hexagram, you're looking at how your inner world, the bottom trigram, is interacting with the outer world, the upper trigram. It's the meeting point between you and what's happening around you. When 2 trigrams stack together to create the hexagram, they create the image, which is a poetic metaphor that helps your mind grasp the vibe of the situation. Every hexagram has an image based on its 2 nature symbols. Instead of just reading an abstract advice, the image paints a picture. For example, if you see fire over lake, your intuition immediately understands the tension between these 2 opposing elements. Think of the image like a simulated scenario. Once you know the personality of the 8 elements, you can get a feel of the situation if it has synergy or conflict without even needing a long explanation. The image bridges the gap between the binary code and the human experience in an artistic way. The first component of the hexagram is the principle, or what is known as Li. It's the universal blueprint. If the hexagram were a building, Li would act as its blueprint. Li is the underlying law of the situation. It explains the universal logic of why things are happening the way that they are. It's the natural order, or the mind of the hexagram, if you will. While the lines may change and shift, the Li remains constant. It's the truth at the center that the hexagram brings to the seeker. When you understand the principle, you understand the reason behind the moment. If the principle is the blueprint, the key, or the vital current, is the electricity that makes the machine of the hexagram run. Ki is the vital force, or the fuel, the energy of the hexagram. It's the current of energy that gives a situation a specific vibe or flavor, if you will. While the principle tells you the logic of the moment, the ki tells you about the movement and the timing that that hexagram brings to the situation. In a divination, ki is the breath that causes a line to move or change. It shows you how a universal principle is actually manifesting in your life right now. If you want to know how to act or how much force to apply in a situation, you look to the ki of the hexagram. If the Li is the blueprint and ki is the energy, the judgment of a hexagram is the executive summary. The judgment acts as a kind of verdict or a strategic directive. It takes the abstract forces of the hexagram and translates them into a clear proclamation. Should you act? Should you wait? Is the path favorable, or is it possibly dangerous? It uses famous recurring phrases such as success, perseverance furthers, or it furthers to cross the great water. This is the I Ching's final word on the direction of your inquiry and the way that it's going. It defines the success or failure of your current path and tells you exactly what to do with the energy at hand. The judgment is the big picture, or the big image. It applies to the entire situation, whereas the specific lines of the hexagram break that situation down into specific moments or steps. The lines of a hexagram are the story of life in motion. If the hexagram is like a title of your situation or the cover of a book, the lines are the chapters. Each line offers specific dialogue, wisdom, or cautions. When you have multiple changing lines in your hexagram, you read them from the bottommost changing line up to the topmost changing line. The lines represent the 6 stages of development. It's like a natural progression of any event from birth to transformation. Think of your lines like a GPS through time. They tell you exactly where you are in the story and what the energy of the moment requires of you. If you have multiple changing lines, they represent different facets of the progression happening all at once. When you get multiple moving lines in your hexagram, the source code can kind of get loud sometimes, maybe even a little contradictory. Here's how to navigate multiple changing lines. The first method is the narrative path, or the story path. You treat all the lines as a sequence in time. The lowest changing line is how the situation starts, and the highest changing line is how your reading resolves. It's a story arc, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. The second method is the many paths method, or the map method. If you have only one changing line, it's a direct hit. You just focus on the advice of that one changing line. If you get 2 changing lines, the bottom is where you are and the top is where the situation is going. This can also indicate a choice or a split path forward. 3 lines changing is called a pivot. The situation is volatile. You look to the middlemost line for the balance of the situation. If you have 4 to 5 changing lines, this is called an anchor. There's too much moving all at once. You should ignore the changing lines and look at the static lines, or the lines that don't change in your resulting hexagram, to see what remains stable. Rarely it does happen, but all 6 lines can change at once, which is a total rebirth. The old situation is completely gone, and that you should ignore the advice of all of these lines. Read the new hexagram's advice entirely. If the directions get too crazy, stop worrying about the turns and just focus on the destination, the relating hexagram. This concludes the second lesson to the Introduction to the I Ching series. We've traveled from the birth of yin and yang to the intricate story arcs found within the 64 hexagrams. Now we understand how to read the blueprint, the energy, and the narrative flow of the lines within the oracle. In our next lesson, we'll prepare for the journey ahead by exploring the ethics of divination, how to explore the oracle with the correct mindset, and how to use it properly. We'll translate ancient terms of the text into a modern context for better understanding. Once we have our bearings, we'll begin the final journey through each of the 64 hexagrams. If you found this material helpful, I hope that you liked the video. Subscribe and follow along for the next lesson.